Roll call. Sarah Pardue. John Carr.
Here.
Rick Stopick. Barbara Roth.
Here.
Dagmar Bras. Kara Cap.
Good morning, I'm here on WebEx.
Penny Pompey. Glenn Groman. Spencer Siegel. Lori Vinegar.
Here.
Holly Harper Larson.
Here via WebEx.
Marcia Hayden. Angela Van.
Here via WebEx.
Edwin Ferguson. David Searle. We have 7.
And good morning. Due to the absence of the chair and vice chair, we will need a nomination for someone to act as chair for this meeting and then a vote by the commission on that.
May I?
Yes.
I move that we have Lori Vinegar, who is the immediate past chair, serve as chair for this meeting.
Second.
Then we could have a vote, just all those in favor.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Passes.
Move on down. Move on down the line. Well, good morning, everybody. It's a wonderful day in South Florida, isn't it? Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have proof of publication?
Yes, Chair, we do.
Great. Postponements and agenda approval.
Actually, if you could take up the vote to allow the participation via WebEx.
Yes, I have it here. Vote for WebEx, and if for the extenuating circumstances for right now. Can I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Motion by Barbara Roth. Seconded by Dagmar Bras. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
The motion carries. And we have postponements and agenda approval.
Yes, Chair.
Do the postponement first or the agenda approval first?
Oh, we could take up the postponement first. So we do have a postponement for item 3C1, which is Hunter's Crossing. Due to the time in which we received the request for postponement, the item would require a vote of the Planning Commission for postponement. And if there are any public speaking comment cards on this item, at this point, those comments would be to speaking to the postponement only.
Yes. Okay. I'll explain about how public comment works. You have 3 minutes to speak. We have public comment. So, and we do have 3C1. We do have 2 cards on it, the Hunter's Crossing. Let me just see. We have a letter here from the applicant for further evaluation of options related to providing workforce housing units and coordination with the surrounding community. That's what they're explaining that they would like that extra time for. And we have 2 here. We have Bradley Biggs and Paul Bursler. This would be just speaking to the postponement. If you agree with it or not agree with it, you do have a couple of minutes to speak, 3 minutes to speak. But would either of you like to speak? And it would just be about the postponement and not about the project details. If you do, you could come up to each lectern. You could state your name and address, please.
Yes, good morning. Tyler Woolsey, Urban Design Studio, on behalf of the applicant. I believe the two folks that were going to speak just left with Ken Tuma with our office as well. They came on behalf of that application. We are working to meet with Patrick Wilson in the West Lake Worth Road community. That was scheduled for earlier this week, and it couldn't happen, so that's why we want to postpone. Telling them that they left before the meeting started. So,
Okay.
you know.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Are there any questions from the group here, from our commissioners? No, then can I have a motion to postpone if someone would like to make that motion?
So moved.
If I may, it looks like they want to be postponed to
October.
October 14th.
Okay.
So if you could include that.
I will include it as postponing to the October 14th Planning Commission meeting. Okay, so a motion by Barbara Roth, seconded by, Carr. Commissioner Carr, that's great. And is there any discussion on that motion? Anybody on WebEx, any discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, I have to let them, I'm just going to do this vote again. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Great. The agenda approval, we need a vote for that?
Yes, so the
Yes.
agenda now as amended.
Yes, okay. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? So moved. Okay. Motion by Dagmar Bras, seconded by Commissioner... Okay, sure. Commissioner Roth, great. Any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. We have minutes from August 12th. Are there any corrections or any discussion on that? Anything at all? Otherwise, can I have a motion for approval of the minutes? So moved. Motion by Commissioner Bras.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Roth. Any discussion on that? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? The motion carries. Maybe the people on WebEx just could, we only heard one voice there, but maybe you can get them through a chat or something, their approval. Okay. Now we have comments by the public on non-agenda items. We don't have any cards with that. And going to the comments by the chair. Wow, what a surprise. It's great to see everybody here today. It's wonderful for you to come and get up so early and come to the meeting, and we just really appreciate it. We're all volunteers here. 3, public hearing. We go 3A, county-initiated text amendment, the Health and Human Services element update. There is staff here, perhaps can give us some introduction to this item.
Yes, and we will be having James Green, the Director of Community Services, providing this presentation for you.
Okay.
Good morning. James Green, Director of the Palm Beach County Community Services Department. Thank you for having me today. I'm also joined by the Assistant County Administrator, Chief Reggie Duran, who's in the audience with us this morning. And I'd like to begin by really saying thank you to Megan Parnell, Stacey Kosaris, Taruna Malhotra, and the Community Services Planning Team for their work on this element. I'd also like to thank and recognize the PDIC Chair and Co-Chair, Dr. Clear and Randy Palo, for facilitating this process, and the past Chair and Co-Chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee, Dr. Chris Kane and Dr. Remnon, for their work and for all of the CAC's work in facilitating this process. And then finally, I'd like to recognize and acknowledge all of the partners, community partners who are involved in this process as well, for taking the time to help ensure that the element reflected what's currently happening in the community. So the Health and Human Services element, this request really came to be because we needed to ensure that many of the things that didn't take place several years ago in the community, that they were reflected in the element. And when I say things, I'm particularly talking about organizations who were taking the lead in ensuring that our most vulnerable populations, that they didn't fall through the cracks when they needed the services, support services that are offered by the Palm Beach County community. And so the element really serves as a guiding document that allows the county to really understand their role and not just funding, but also providing and supporting the delivery of health and human services. And so this element really further defines the county's relationship with other funders so that we can work together and more strategically in ensuring that we have a safety net for our most vulnerable residents. There are no implications to the Unified Land Development Code, so that should be mentioned as well. And back in 1989, the Board of County Commissioners recognized the importance of having an organized process to ensure that our most vulnerable residents had the supports that they needed. And so they developed the Citizens Advisory Committee, which is comprised of institutional leaders in various domains, whether it's housing and homelessness, around child care, employment, transportation, education, health and health and wellness, safety and justice. So there are representatives from institutions leading the work in all of those domains to ensure that we're coordinating effectively and efficiently in providing and delivering human services. And so the CAC, they are constantly meeting. They meet monthly to ensure that any tweaks that need to be made to the system of care to ensure our residents get the supports they need, that they are indeed making and recommending to the board. And so any amendments for the element really comes through the CAC, and they had an opportunity to weigh in heavily on some of the things that we're mentioning here today. When we talk about a system of care, we're really focusing on physical and behavioral health services that meets the needs of our residents. And an effective system of care doesn't just look at intervention. It really goes further upstream, looking at ways that we can prevent some of the things that are happening with our populations, and with a lens on our vulnerable populations, which is defined in the element. And so when we're delivering these health and human services, we're really making sure that we have an accountability structure, that we have services that are available, that they are accessible, that we're coordinating in an efficient way to make sure that there aren't gaps within our system of care, and that the services are of quality and evidence-based. And so the element really lays that out in more detail for each of the domains that I previously mentioned. And the purpose for updating the element, again, the last time that it was updated, there were a number of initiatives that are currently underway that were not developed at that time. And so the Youth Services Department has been instituted with the county. And so they play a very important role in delivering health and human services. There's a Cradle to Career initiative called Birth to 22 that hadn't developed the last time that the element had been revised. And there are a number of other collective impact initiatives where you have a backbone organization that's really leading the coordination of services more broadly throughout the county. Those things weren't mentioned in the element, and so this update will now reflect the work that's happening in those spaces. Another thing that we wanted to do was to ensure that the element was aligned with the board's strategic priorities, and so the element reflects that alignment as well. As I mentioned, the element allows organizations, funders, other governmental institutions, nonprofit leaders to coordinate more efficiently to prevent duplication of services. It allows everyone to know what their role is, who's taking the lead in those roles, and how we can work across domains or across systems to provide services more efficiently. We know that a lot of these services are interdependent. Right? You can't maintain a job if you're unhealthy. And if you can't maintain a job, then oftentimes you won't have adequate transportation because you can't afford it, or you can't maintain housing because you can't afford it, or childcare, or some of the other services. And sometimes your families are hungry because they don't have a job. And so they're all interdependent, and we want to make sure that we recognize that and that that's reflected in our service delivery approach, to the extent that we have somewhat of a one-stop shop for many of the families that are coming in, that doesn't put a lot of strain and pressure on them trying to get to a lot of the service supports that they need. And so in doing that, we've created this opportunity ecosystem that really maximizes the success for individuals and families who are seeking these supports. And when you have a system that's organized the way that our system is, and we've received a number of national recognitions for the way that we are organized and how we work together, it also maximizes the return on the investment with many of the services that we are delivering. But we attract a lot of investors from foundations and others who are really willing to provide funding for our community to pilot different initiatives that would have implications, broader implications, state and nationwide. And so the goals and objectives outlined in the Health and Human Services really shows how our system of care works, and they cover a variety of topics that I previously mentioned, and they also provide more or less policy recommendations that are subject to the CAC's review. So anytime there are tweaks or gaps that we've identified within this system of care, institutional practices or policies that need to be aligned in order to make our services more efficient, we'll discuss them at the Citizens Advisory Committee, and then recommendations are made to the Board of County Commissioners. And oftentimes, when gaps are identified within the system of care, the Community Services Department has a funding stream of financially assisted agencies. And so we would issue an RFP that identifies those gaps, and then allow nonprofit partners to develop proposals on how they would fill those gaps, and then those recommendations would again go before the Citizens Advisory Committee, and then to the Board of County Commissioners for final approval. And so having that process in place allows us to sustain core services. It allows us to really stay on top of any emergent needs when things like COVID happens, or there are other things that we can't necessarily predict. When they happen, we have the agility and the flexibility to be able to respond to those needs. And so every year we do this assessment, and any recommendations that we may make to the Board of County Commissioner is grounded in data. It's grounded in an organized process where community has the ability to give input on what it is that we are recommending, and it really fosters a lot of inclusion with our health and human services system and process. And so this was publicly noticed to other governmental entities across the county. Also, we publicly noticed, and I say we, Community Services has sent notifications to our partnering agencies, and all of the partners involved have signed off on this particular amendment. And then it went to the Citizens Advisory Committee for approval on May the 12th. And then now it's going before you here today. So I'll pause there to answer any questions or any comments that you may have.
Okay. Yes, questions or comments? Commissioner Roth?
Thank you. Very clear, and it was very interesting to read through this in advance, so thank you for providing it. 2 questions, please. I wondered if the timing of this was accelerated because of what we went through with COVID, or was this scheduled to come out some changes to the element, or was this accelerated?
We've been discussing this for a little while now. Certainly, COVID had. We definitely considered how COVID impacted our health and human services system of care, but I would say that we've been working with this for a little while now, and so I can't say that COVID was the impetus, if you will, but certainly we had to consider it because of the needs that were created as a result of it. There were a lot of people who were unemployed, a lot of people who are still dealing with the housing crisis that we're in, and there was certainly a need for us to be more strategic in our approach to ensuring that our most vulnerable populations, that they weren't falling through the cracks.
Thank you. And if I might, a second question, and you just brought me to it, on the client end of it. With some of our services, we have someone called a caseworker. Is there someone who helps the needy person navigate through transportation, housing, and all of that as a coordinator?
Yeah, so the way that it works is there are organizations that kind of lead each of the domains. So for housing and homelessness, it would be like Community Services and the Department of Housing and Economic Development. Each of us have our specific role in ensuring that those services are provided to individuals in need. And so the idea is if someone comes in for housing assistance, then we want to be able to either navigate or lead them to providers who can provide them with transportation or other types of assistance. And if we can't do that, then we want to be able to give them somewhat of a warm handoff or some information that will help them to navigate the system more effectively. And so the whole idea is once we get to a point where we're really, really operating at an optimal level, they'll be able to go into, for any service, if they want to go into PalmTran, they'll also be able to have information on how they can get other support services that they need. Not all of them will have case management support, but we want all of them to have knowledge about the support services that are available to them and to be able to access those support services. And so it would be more than just, say, going online and applying for the services, but for those vulnerable populations that don't have computers or internet or other types of things, we want to make sure that we're agile enough to bring those services to their communities so that they can gain the access.
Thank you, Mr. Green. And just to follow up, the concern we hear with so many government municipal services is the frustration that people try to get through. I guess when I use the word caseworker, is there someone some name, some phone number given to a client to facilitate when there's an issue so that it can be handled as quickly as possible?
Yeah, so for all of the services that are named, 211 would typically be the number that's easiest to remember. And so they can access all of those services through 211. And then for the majority of those services, they can call 561-355-4792, and there's a call center representative there who can help them to access many of the other services that are offered through our system of care.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Dagmar Ross.
I just want to make a comment. I am just so proud, at one more time, to live in Palm Beach County, that we are addressing these issues for people who are not fortunate or, just fell off the track a little bit. I just want to say I'm proud of your efforts and your committee and your advisors and your volunteers because, when you see somebody asking for a handout on an intersection or something like that, so many times it's like, we need to lead them in the right direction so they can get the help they need. I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Chief Duran, would you like to say anything? Have any? It's great to see you here. Oh, and now you're Administrator Duran.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Doctor. I first want to say thank you to this board for the support you've always offered the community and how you represent us and make us better. Thank you to Dr. Green for a tremendous presentation. We have no greater expert. We're so fortunate to have him as a resource in this county, and you just saw a very small fraction of the responsibilities that he has and all his efforts to make this community better for those that aren't as fortunate as some of us. So thank you to the board, and thank you, Dr. Green, for your presentation.
Great, and it was great seeing you last week when Patrick Kennedy received the award, and you were there, and we have the best fire company in almost all of the United States, right? Only 0.01% of the
Getting better
fire,
every day.
Yeah, and that is just the ISO Class 1 community recognition, and you had a lot to do with that, with all the years the few years before this new fire chief came in, but you all worked together so well.
I think we're very fortunate to have a tremendous team of firefighters. Not only that, but the support of boards such as yours, as well as the Board of County Commissioners and our tremendous administrator, Virginia Baker. So thank you very much. Definitely a team effort.
Thank you. As far as the meat of this goes, all of the underlining, there were a few typos. Do we do that here, or should I provide this to you later?
You could provide that to us later, and we can do any additional cleanup prior to it moving forward to the
There's
board.
just a few things that, who would I go over that with after?
You could provide that to Stephanie Gregory or myself.
Okay. Let's see, we have this wonderful product here, so can we please have a motion to approve?
Are there any
To-
public comments?
No, there are no public comments on this.
So moved.
A motion by Commissioner Carr. Any second that? Seconded by Commissioner Roth. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Great. We'll go. Thank you for everything. Thank you for your presentation. We go on to 3B, privately proposed small-scale amendment, Americo Center. We have the applicant. We'll have the applicant, and then we'll have staff, and then we have public comment, which I do not have any cards on this. And then we'll go to the discussion.
Good morning, Commission. Melissa Costella on behalf of Kotler and Herring. I'm representing the Americo Center. We have a future land use map amendment request before you this morning. Here. There you go.
The owner of the applicant is America Development Group. I have with me Donaldson Hearing to support the project, and Adam Kerr with Kimley Horn. We have the future land use map amendment is LR1 to CLO, which is the commercial low office future land use. We have concurrent requests in with the zoning department for a zoning map amendment, also with the CLO. The professional medical office are the uses that we are proposing, and a Class A conditional use with subject to BCC approval. The subject site is south of North Lake Boulevard, and the major intersections are North Lake and Military Trail. This is within the Square Lake community, or just north of the Square Lake community. This is the subject site in context with the existing future land use amendment. Sorry, where am I putting? Apologize for that. Sorry. Gotta love technology. So the two CLO projects are listed, are circled in the red, were the Place of Hope projects that were approved in 2017. And the Commercial West project, which was approved in 2018. These are neighborhood uses. The CLO is a neighborhood use. This is not working. Providing development. This thing is not working. Thank you. You want to just go back one? I just wanted to say that the commercial low office is very compatible with the surrounding uses. It provides a transition between the neighborhood, the low residential office uses, the low residential uses above the North Lake Boulevard. And it's important to note that there are other commercial uses, even though there are future land uses that are residential. We have daycares, a private school, and the two commercial low offices east of the site. You can see there's a large majority of commercial within the intersection of North Lake Boulevard, and this low-intensity commercial office use will be a complementary to that. They'll provide neighborhood services, office, and medical office. They are small tenants that are going in there, and it's appropriate for the land use. The request is consistent with your comprehensive plan. The urban suburban tier of less than 0.5 acres, we're significantly less than that, and it's compatible with the surrounding area. The LR zoning future land use is no longer appropriate for this land. We are abutting a 6-lane highway and having a single-family residential home along this corridor, this very busy corridor, is no longer appropriate. The low-intensity commercial uses for the CLL zoning district will allow office and medical office, and it will also buffer the residential from the North Lake Boulevard. We reached out to the community several times in April of 2021 when this application was initially submitted, or actually before it was submitted, and sent initial comments to the Square Lake community just to reach out to them and let them know what's going on. And we met with them on July 21st. It was our first community meeting, and that's not a typo, it's July 2021. And our second community meeting was in June of 2022, just to go over some final edits that we made to the site plan. We worked very closely to staff. As you can see on the right-hand side is the Place of Hope commercial projects as they are today. The one on the east side is fully developed and is working perfectly. They have their tenants there. The existing site to the west is a church, and we are vacant to the east. This is the site in context. As you can see, that the the staff has worked with us to ensure that the setbacks are appropriate for the land, that the corridor is consistent throughout. We are proposing pedestrian connections throughout the site. Staff has put in some conditions of approval within the zoning application to require cross-access. We are proposing a 6-foot wall, which is consistent with the Place of Hope projects, to buffer the south property line, the east property line, and the west property line adjacent to the commercial uses. As you can see, the interconnected pedestrian sidewalks and the cross-access to the west. And I would just like to take the remaining time to answer any of your questions, and thank you for your consideration this morning.
Thank you. And we have a staff presentation now, correct?
Yes, Jerry Lodge with the Planning Division will be presenting this.
Okay. Good morning, Jerry Lodge with the Planning Division. The amendment before you today is Americo Center. The site is 1.08 acres. It's located on the south side of North Lake Boulevard, about 200 feet west of Elizabeth Avenue. It's on the northern edge of the Square Lake neighborhood. The applicant's requesting an amendment to change the future land use designation from low residential 1 unit per acre to commercial low office with an underlying 1 unit per acre. The concurrent zoning application is requesting 7,800 square feet of medical and professional office uses. So here's the site outlined in red. East of the site, on the south side of North Lake Boulevard and also at the intersection of North Lake Boulevard and Military Trail, are properties with commercial feature land use designations ranging from commercial low office to commercial high. Directly east, south, and west of the site are properties within the Square Lake neighborhood, which have a low residential 1 unit per acre feature land use designation. North of the site are a range of residential feature land use designations, including some institutional feature land uses as well. All the properties seen without an assigned feature land use are within the municipal limits of Palm Beach Gardens. Here's a closer view of the site outlined in red again. And to the east are 2 previously adopted feature land use amendments from low residential 1 unit per acre to commercial low office and retain the underlying 1 unit per acre. The first is Place of Hope, which was improved in March of 2017. It's on about 2.25 acres and is developed with 18,000 square feet of medical and professional office uses. The second site is Place of Hope Commercial West, which was approved or adopted in October of 2018, and this is situated on 1.07 acres and currently has approvals for 7,800 square feet of medical and professional office uses. Staff reviewed the amendment request and finds that the proposed use is consistent with the non-residential uses along North Lake Boulevard. Staff also finds that the commercial low office designation provides a transitional use between low residential feature land use designations to the south and North Lake Boulevard to the north. This is also compatible with the adjacent residential feature land use designations, including the recently approved amendments along North Lake Corridor. The proposed amendment is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan, including the commercial location criteria, which allows commercial low office feature land use designations to be assigned to mid-block properties so long as they're fronting a collector or arterial roadway. During the public notification process, the Planning Division sent 500-foot and interested party notices. We also held an informational meeting, which no members of the public attended. And staff is recommending approval of this amendment, and that concludes our presentation.
Well, thank you for that. We have no public comment cards on this, and I don't see anybody in the audience that disputes that. Okay, so we can have any questions or comments by any board members. Go ahead, Mr. Ross.
This is really, not a problem approving it, but my question is, the property that's directly to the east and the south of it, it looks like it has not even been touched yet. It's totally trees / pines.
It is fallow.
Excuse me?
It is fallow.
It is fallow.
Yeah.
That's the word I was looking for. Sorry. Okay. So in the future, and you said this is part of the neighborhood, the Square Lake neighborhood. Is it just part of the neighborhood and somebody just didn't develop it yet? Or is there a separate owner where he will have the possibility of developing this 10 acres into whatever he wants?
Right. I believe the largest, one of the largest property owners in the Square Lake neighborhood is actually the properties directly south of that. And they do have the LR1 future land use designation, and they're able to develop it as they see fit with that, unless, something were to come forward later. But
Okay, so in the future, because there's still access to North Lake Boulevard, so it kind of does make sense that in the future, something pretty intense could pop in there. But because even though it's just part of the neighborhood, like this house probably was, it can come forward in the future and do some kind of an amendment or land use change for something that might be kind of intense.
So,
Possibly,
yeah, we do
no?
intakes for land use amendments, and it's totally their prerogative if they see fit to come and request one.
Okay, but obviously they'd have to go through the approval process,
Correct.
and we would have to wait and see what happens. I mean, I'm glad that there are homes to the west of this. I hate run-on commercial that just never, ever ends. But the proximity to Military Trail and also the surrounding commercial low uses, and commercial low is something that's always utilized well in the area. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Anyone else here? Anyone on WebEx?
Not for me, thanks.
For me either.
Okay.
No comments for me.
Okay. I have a question of staff. We see that this is, we're asked to approve a .5 FAR here. I just want to know, why do you not put a limitation on the square footage when at this point they're only asking for 7,818 square feet? Neighbors may not have a problem with that, but then
Well,
we have the
the-
potential of 23,000.
Right.
So why do you do that? Just asking.
The comprehensive plan has policies that regulate the FAR, and so long as they are within that, below it, they're able to develop up to that or under. And it's, again, their prerogative to do less than the FAR, and it is in close conformance with the Place of Hope and Place of Hope West, and their approvals were also, slightly under FAR. Given it is located right next to low residential land uses, it seems good.
And we typically do those conditions when there's an issue with 35D traffic analysis. So that's there wasn't any issues with the meeting 35D at the .5 FAR. So we didn't put a condition related to square footage.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that explanation. Any other questions or comments? Can I have a motion, please?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner John Carr. Any second to that? Seconded by Commissioner Barbara Roth. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. We have, the next one is, let's see, that we go on to the regular agenda for the privately proposed text initiation, Trotting Center overlay. We have the applicant.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jeff Brophy with WGI. Here to present the Trotting Center overlay, and this is an initiation of this text amendment, so this is not a consideration of land use, but an initiation to the board for this text amendment. With me here is Scott Backman, our land use attorney. Also the owner and developer, Ryan Zuckerman of Zuckerman Homes, is here. And we also have representatives of Heritage Farms. And in 22 years of doing this, I don't think I've worked on a more collaborative project than with the folks at Heritage Farms. And so first want to thank them for all their help and work. It's been a heavy lift, and I think we've come a long way. We're really just at the start of kind of the public hearing side of things. So there's still a lot of work to do, but we thank them for all their collaboration so far. So just to give you some context, the Trotting Center is about 105 acres. It's just south of Hypoluxo Road on the west side of State Road 7. And just to give you some kind of historical context of what's happened in the area, this is the site here in red. And as you can see, this was taken back in 1999. And you can see where Florida Turnpike was kind of the line being held for development. And you will see kind of the eventual development or start of development of some of the residential and commercial projects to the west of Florida's Turnpike here. This is in 2002. You can see the Savannah Estates directly across the street being developed. Isola Bella just to the north is just starting construction there as well. So everything's kind of continuing to kind of press west. And as we move forward to today, these are the conditions today. You can see Melrose PUD to the south with an LR3 land use designation. And a lot of the development to the north is the LR2 land use designation. Again, you can see the Trotting Center there outlined in red. Specific to this site and what will eventually be before you for the land use amendment is an LR2 designation for the Trotting Center with a maximum plan of 166 units, which actually equates to about 1.6 dwelling units to the acre. So a little less than what you see on the east side of 441. And that is a master plan and a site plan that we've been working with the folks at Heritage Farms with, and a density that we've come up with, as well as kind of a detailed site plan that I'll show you in a little bit in regards to some of the details that we've discussed and worked out with Heritage Farms. So just to give you a little background here, this is a tier map, and you can see the subject site kind of to the bottom of the screen in the red, and directly to our east is the urban-suburban tier, kind of in the orange color there, and directly to our south is the ag-reserve tier. The rural tier, in reality, the majority of it you'll find. This is kind of a small pocket, which is, the Heritage Farms area and Homeland, but the majority of it is really west and north of this location. And so what you have is this continual pressure of development to the west, and really the only area that can be focused on for development along the State Road 7 frontage is about 2,600 linear feet. Located kind of on the south side of the Trotting Center property up to Heritage Farms Road. The rest of this corridor, you'll find are existing commercial low land use designations, as well as the South Florida National Cemetery. So really, when we were looking at this in regards to what is the development potential, what is the reasonable development potential of this area, it is really the frontage along State Road 7, which again equates to about 2,600 linear feet. So relatively small area that would seem reasonable for some level of development. In regards to community outreach, we knew immediately the first thing that we wanted to do was first understand from staff what the possible processes could be before we eventually reached out to Heritage Farms. We had a meeting with them of I don't want to say the entirety of the community, but a good group of people back in February of this year, where we showed an original site plan with a higher density than what you have or will eventually have before you, but it was at a higher density than what we landed with the Heritage Farms folks. And we also went to Cobra Growth Management to get their input, to say at least mixed reviews. I see some smiles. But the real message was work with the folks in Heritage Farms on something that would be reasonable. And that's exactly what we have done. So between March and today, and we continue to work with them, we have worked out details in regards to both the site plan, details going as deep as what the landscaping should look like and how it's maintained, what the land use application should look like, what the zoning application should look like. And so a couple of the things, again, the details that we've talked about, again, master and site plan layout, the density, again, at the 166 maximum units, lot sizes. We worked on a plan that would show a gradient of lot sizes, and I'll get to that when I show you the master plan. Again, the buffer treatments, our land use amendment, as well as our text amendment and overlay. July 6th, we had a joint meeting with Heritage Farms and Palm Beach County staff on the process. July 27th, we had a joint meeting with Heritage Farms staff as well as District Commissioner McKinley to talk about that process and steps moving forward. And one of those steps moving forward was on August 25th. The BCC directed staff to bring forward a Heritage Farms overlay. So while this initiation is specific to the Trotting Center 105 acres, what you will see back is an overlay that will also include the rest of the Heritage Farms area, which is directed by BCC and will be done by staff. So again, what we have in the system, a privately proposed text amendment. I won't go through the details, that's all in the staff report. We also have a concurrent future land use amendment application to go to the LR2. Again, we've worked out details in regards to what that density will actually be. We also have a concurrent zoning application that we have already submitted. And the concept here is much like what was done recently with, again, Pioneer Road. It's the ability to allow for the meaningful and reasonable development of those pieces that have the infrastructure along State Road 7 in regards to access and utilities, but also provide for protection to the rest of the Heritage Farms area, which we recognize as a very unique one, and which is why we've worked out countless concessions in regards to what that plan is going to look like. And in regards to lot sizes, again, we're going to have a gradient of lot sizes. To the west, we'll have lots 3 acres in size that will be a little more compatible, I guess, with some of the larger lots in Heritage Farms, but there also exists some smaller lots also within Heritage Farms at just under a 1/4 acre. The idea being that we're going to have that gradient of 3 acre lots on the west to 1/2 acre lots to about 1/4 acre lots as we get closer to State Road 7. And again, within the Heritage Farms area, if we look at the totality of all the parcels, which there's about 172 parcels, about half of those parcels are actually less than 5 acres in size. So just to kind of get to the meat of some of the text amendments, the initiation of what is before you today, is really we're just, in regards to the rural tier, we're adding the Trotting Center overlay, and this is not a new concept. This has already been done with the Western Communities residential overlay on Southern. So we will be adding the language of adding the Trotting Center to that language as well. And the current rural tier does allow for different types of residential development, and you can see that you can be a rural residential cluster. There's a variable lot size. There's plan unit developments, again, which is currently allowed for the Western Communities residential overlay, and we will be adding the Trotting Center overlay to that. There will be a new objective and new policy. The purpose of the Trotting Center overlay is to establish policies that provide a framework to preserve the low-density rural character of Heritage Farms by allowing the transitional density that I talked about that are compatible with the rural lifestyle and promote the use of ag in those areas and that are approximate to State Road 7. And then we have specific boundaries which are specific to the Trotting Center property. So what that will do is this language is only allowed for really the development of the Trotting Center based on certain criteria and will not allow for kind of the proliferation of development throughout Heritage Farms. The Heritage Farms overlay that will be moving forward will further prevent that development as well. We did provide also certain criteria that will be specific to this site. There is a minimum acreage size of 100 acres. There is a maximum density of 2 units per acre, although we will be below that. And the site must be located contiguous to the urban-suburban tier. It has to have frontage and access onto State Road 7 and be located east of Park Lane, which will prevent any further development moving to the west of the boundaries of this property. Again, we will have the lot size transition with the smallest lots located on State Road 7 and the largest lots located towards the western property. That is that gradient of different lot sizes going from the 3-acre to the half-acre to the quarter-acre. And we've also worked out expanded buffers with surrounding the property. Within those buffers, we've also actually met on site. We had a great meeting in regards to what the community would like those buffers to look like, the types of plants. So we're getting pretty deep in regards to outside of I guess land use issues, but trying to preserve kind of that rural nature. We've agreed to certain conditions in regards to the 100% native species of plants and how those will be planted and maintained. All access to the development again will be through State Road 7, and you must connect to the county water and sewer. The idea being these couple parcels again between Trotting Center and Hypoluxo have the infrastructure there in regards to its access and frontage on State Road 7 and its availability of county utilities. This is the proposed master plan. You can see in the kind of the darker yellow, the 3-acre lots in the back going to a gradient of half-acre lots, ultimately to the 70-foot lots in the front. We have a small civic pod that fronts State Road 7 there as well. Our access is proposed to be directly across the street from Savannah Estates. And again, this is not new. The Western Communities residential is already in the comp plan. Again, this would be adding the Trotting Center for the same type of allowance. And in regards to moving forward, again, the BCC directed staff to bring forward a Heritage Farms overlay in August, which will be coming back to you as well. Ultimately, that will be concurrent with our application, so both should be moving forward. By the time we're done, both should be meeting the BCC at the same time. Again, we're here today for just the initiation. September, end of September, we have the text amendment initiation at BCC. November, we'll be back to you, and that's where we will have the actual land use to consider and some of the details and conditions of that application. And ultimately, a little quick, we'll go to transmittal in November and ultimate adoption and zoning approval in February. Staff does support the initiation and of the text amendment to provide opportunity for the board to consider and direct policy before we come back to you. That concludes my presentation. I know there's a few members of Heritage Farms here. We're happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Can we please have staff's presentation now?
Okay, good morning. Stephanie Gregory with the Planning Division. As Mr. Brophy mentioned, this is the consideration of the initiation of a private text amendment for the Trotting Center overlay. So in May of this year, the applicant submitted a future land use application from RR10, 1 unit per 10 acres, to low residential, 2 units per acre. It also included a tier change from the rural tier to the urban suburban tier. However, after discussions with neighboring residents of Heritage Farms, the applicant agreed to pursue a text amendment to create an overlay. The overlay would then allow the site to remain in the rural tier, and the tier change would no longer be needed in order to achieve the applicant's desired density. The proposed text amendment request is to revise policies in the rural tier to establish
the allowance of a transitional density option of up to 2 units per acre. The proposed policy language also clarifies that the site would not be allowed to exceed this 2 units per acre through the use of transferred development rights or the workforce housing bonus program. Development in the overlay would also be subject to additional criteria, including specified location boundaries and acreage requirements that would be applicable to the subject site only. And the concurrent site plan would be required to demonstrate access onto State Road 7 only, provide that transition of lot sizes from the larger going from the west to the east, and then also to provide expanded buffers of 30 to 50 feet. So staff's assessment is that the proposed overlay is confined to the subject site only and provides a density increase mechanism alternative to a tier change. And so staff does support the initiation in order to provide an opportunity for the board to consider and provide direction on how this amendment should proceed. However, it does not indicate staff support for the final developed policy language or the FLUA amendment. So should the board initiate these proposed amendments, staff will return with a full analysis and staff recommendation to be heard, as Mr. Brophy mentioned, in the November Planning Commission and BCC transmittal hearings. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. We have 2 cards from the public here. There's 3 minutes are allotted, and we have 2 lecterns here. Can we please have Richard Moyrod to one and Melissa McGoffey to the other? And please state your name when you start to speak and your address. Thank you. We could start off with Richard Moyrod.
My name is Richard Moyrod. I live at 7667 Park Lane Road, Lake Worth, Florida, in Heritage Farms. I've been in Heritage Farms for more than 40 years operating a native plant nursery. Native plant nurseries were once at US 1, then Congress, then Military Trail, then Jog Road, then Turnpike, then 441. They were pushed west. West of 441 is the Ag Reserve, too big for a small nursery. I found Heritage Farms and established a 10-acre nursery. The zoning is RR10, 1 unit for 10 acres. In 1989, the comprehensive plan identified Heritage Farms as within the rural tier, protecting open land for agriculture and equestrian uses. In past years, multiple attempts at tier change and commercial were challenged and defeated. We've been told that the rural tier is protected from urbanization. The Trotting Center, stables, and track are part of the original 1958 Heritage Farms equestrian development. As our population increases, the demand for open space, parks, and recreation also increases. Equestrians have frequently asked for more access to lands for riding and exercising. The Trotting Center would have been a valuable addition to our county parks as an equestrian destination with bridle paths throughout the neighborhood. Parks apparently has no funds for such an acquisition. Continued commercial and residential development in Village of Wellington suggests diminished equestrian opportunities, even in areas that tout such things. Early this year, BCC was approached by Zuckerman Homes, who wanted to build in the Trotting Center. They were told to involve the community. A meeting was held with a majority of residents, some staff, and Commissioner McKinley. The proposal of 488 homes on 100 acres with a 48-fold increase in density, an outrageous proposal that met with strong disapproval. Again, a majority of residents were present. After some research and inquiries, we were sickened to hear that both staff and commissioners felt that increased density in Heritage Farms was necessary to accommodate an expanding population and the demand for more housing. The carefully crafted comprehensive plan would simply be voided. Our options were simple and stark. Buy the land, we don't have the funds. Mount a legal challenge, again, we don't have the funds for protracted litigation, which would have little chance of success anyway, and be knocked down in Tallahassee. Or work with the developer to minimize the harm to our community. For the past 6 months, we've been meeting with the developer to find a compromise. Density was paramount to all the residents, but it seems that magnificent 10-acre estates are not profitable. We finally agreed to a density of 166 units with a gradation of large lots at the westernmost portion, increasing in density to the east up to 441. The developer also agreed to offer financial and political help to the community by way of the following: a fund for legal work, Can you give me 30 more seconds?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you.
You have it.
A fund for legal work, culvert replacement on Heritage Farms Road, the use of native plants with and around the development, direct help in obtaining an overlay to protect Heritage Farms, and future attempts at subdivision, and many other items. With the help of staff, the Trotting Center development will be allowed a text amendment, by text amendment, thus maintaining the rural tier designation, as you've heard. To protect the groundwater in our wells, restricted use pesticides will be prohibited, and landscaping will be done with appropriate native plants. Negotiations are ongoing, but both sides have worked in good faith to see a reasonable outcome. If completed as we've described, the outlines of this project will become a model for environmentally responsible developments throughout the county. Heritage Farms has now absorbed a massive amount of the expanding population directed to us by the Board of County Commissioners. To preserve any hope for our neighborhood, we ask that you recommend limiting any future subdivision to RR5 in Heritage Farms, 1 unit per 5 acres. Please submit that or transmit that to the board. Thank you.
Go ahead, Melissa McCoffey, go ahead.
Yes, hi, I'm sorry. I've got these glasses on because I had cataract surgery yesterday, so I'm not trying to hide behind the glasses. Anyways, my name is Melissa McGaughy. My address is 7713 Park Lane Road. That's Heritage Farms, and thank you for having me here today. So I'll just start for a little history of where I am and why I am here today. 25 years ago, I lived in south of here in unincorporated Broward on a 2.5-acre lot where I had a nursery, I had a small farm. High-density development kept surrounding my community, and never was there any discussion as to why this would be allowed or what considerations would be given to the like-minded people in my community in Broward. That also had acreage, horses, nurseries, and small farms. Eventually, we were all pushed out. So I moved to Heritage Farms with the hopes that this time I could live in peace, as the Heritage Farms is situated in the rural tier. It's currently zoned 1 home per 10 acres with limited services, the Ag Reserve to the south, the Loxahatchee National Wildlife Refuge to the west, Homeland with a minimum of 1 home per 5 acres to the northwest, the National Cemetery and State Road 7, 441 to the east. But again, here we are. Now this time there's a stark difference, as the developer has reached out to the community and has worked with the community and has made concessions for the community. This we acknowledge. Although this meeting is regarding the proposed text change amendment, I would like the following stated for the record. And I think Mr. Brophy already did that, so I don't want to reiterate exactly what he said, but I do want this for the record. We have worked for the last 6 months with Mr. Brophy, Mr. Backman, and their client with over a dozen in-person meetings, Zoom meetings, phone calls, and endless emails. During that 6-month period, the number of units adjusted from 488 to their 100-acre site to 166 in their proposed development. A gradient plan of larger acreage homes would be adjacent to the Heritage Farms community and smaller lots closer to 441. Also, the surrounding buffer wildlife corridor would increase to 50 feet, touching Heritage Farms community, and 30 to the south, 25 for the remaining. On the inside, in the landscape buffer, the developer would have a 6-foot wall. The landscape buffers would require 100% native vegetation, up to 45 different native species. And the interior of the proposed development would require 70% native plantings, 100% low pollution lighting, and ability for homeowners to facilitate solar rooftop options. Also, the larger lot size would be allowed some agriculture uses such as horses, poultry, beekeeping, etc., as per their HOA bylaws. The other concessions by the developer are monetary donation to assist Heritage Farms in attorney fees, replace a culvert that is collapsing on our only ingress and egress, reconstructing the Heritage Farms community entryway sign that DOT removed over 12 years ago, median native tree plantings, I'm almost finished, plantings, I'm sorry, let me just catch my thought here, high-speed internet hardwired into the community, a few other things. Again, this developer has made concessions and has made adjustments to the development that would be more of a hybrid development, which is more compatible with Heritage Farms. We will support this. However, please understand that Heritage Farms is a rural community that strongly desires to stay that way. And we are not here to be surrounded by high-density development and forced out once again. This is it. Enough is enough. Not every square inch of Palm Beach
Thank you very much.
needs to be developed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have now discussion among here. Any questions or comments? We'll start from whoever has their hand up. We have John Carr. Go ahead. Did you want to say something or ask a question?
Just a quick comment. I just want to, I'm going to support this, and it's mainly because of all the concessions that look like it's been made. Growing up down there and watching the place grow, it's amazing. When I grew up down there, Military Trail was out west, and there was nothing out there but farms and places for us to, probably get in a little bit of trouble out there. But I just appreciate everybody's concessions and the residents speaking. Thank you.
Barbara Roth.
Okay, where do I start? This is tough. Needless to say, the concessions are greatly appreciated, not just by, I imagine, the Heritage Farms people, but by all of the people who live in the area and are concerned about increased density. Some of you have heard me on this issue before. This is initiation. I understand that. And I understand the residents of Heritage Farms. I've been, honored to be part of some of their discussions over the last few years, and certainly over these last 6 months. They feel they have done about the best they can. As a planning commissioner, it troubles me to hear that what ultimately happens, with the best of intentions from this particular applicant, what ultimately happens is because of legal fees, because of timing, volunteers, stress level in a community, people feel they cannot continue to fight something. So when you have an agreeable applicant, in this case they certainly did, who brings down the numbers and the density, the community sort of throws up its hands and says, okay, we'll go with it. And I understand that, and I am happy for this particular location and this accommodation for this community, Heritage Farms. However, you've also heard me talk about precedent and what this means continuing on State Road 7 and other areas. Added on to both of the speakers today, and they didn't have quite enough time to get into it, I believe would have been saying, well, we did begin to hear it from the last speaker, enough is enough, this is it, we don't want this to continue. So although this community has had the advantage of a very amenable applicant, not every community going forward in negotiations will have that. Therefore, I'm not sure at this point whether I'm going to support this, recognizing that this is only initiation. I get it, but I also know generally where that leads. So thank you. I'd like to hear from my other fellow commissioners.
Dagmar Bross, go ahead.
Hi there. There's a lot of questions that I have. There's if they do the overlay for Heritage Farms, and this would include the trotting center, what about Tommy's farmland that abuts the trotting center to the north? And then there's even more property. I mean, it's almost like a horseshoe effect that you're creating by just doing the trotting center with this, taking it out of the rural tier. You're not taking it out, but you're adjusting it, doing the overlay. What happens to the property directly to the north?
Right. So I guess taking a step back. So effectively, there'll be two overlays that'll be coming forward concurrently. One for the Heritage Farms area and then this particular overlay for this site. The proposed boundary of the Heritage Farms overlay, which the board directed staff to work on, would include the property you're referring to the north. That said, if you remember when the board adopted the Pioneer Road Rural Enclave overlay, there were a few parcels that requested to be removed from the boundary, and there were a few that the board did exclude. So the proposed boundary we have now for the Heritage Farms overlay includes that property. It will be up to the board ultimately what the final boundary of that overlay is.
Okay, so I mean, this is row crops, and rumor has it that there's already a contract, so that we'll see what happens. Hats off to the developer, Mr. Zuckerman, because when you came to Cobra with 488 houses, we were not really nice. And I appreciate you working. I had conversations with 2 residents from Heritage Farms, and I actually drove through there yesterday, and the Trotting Center, it's a little rundown. You got a couple really cool looking buildings in there. I wish we could preserve them, but I know we're not going to be able to. You're not going to. But the point is, even though we're addressing the Trotting Center, there are other properties that are closer. And with the Pioneer overlay, there were people that did not want to be included in the overlay because they wanted the freedom to develop their property to more than 1 unit to the acre. How are we going to address this new property it's going to come in that's just north of the property? Are we going to be able to keep that to the LR2 as well? Are we going to hold their feet to the fire to work with Heritage Farms like Mr. Zuckerman has? How can we protect these people in the future? This is not over.
No, and it's a great question and a very fair point, because while this overlay for the Trotting Center, the language is very specific to this property, there's nothing stopping a private landowner for submitting an application to potentially, seek something similar. Again, the boundary that staff is working with for the Heritage Farms overlay includes that property. They may request that the board not include that property. I see your point, and we've seen this before where, an applicant will ask for something similar nearby, and that would be dealt with, as a site-specific issue at that time.
Did you want to talk, Mr.?
Yeah, I was going to say also this is somewhat unique how they've designed this. It'll be very hard to have precedence on this particular parcel or another parcel just because the specifics don't match. So I don't think we're creating a precedence, or it'll be very hard to achieve this precedence. So that's kind of like the built-in protection. I don't think another applicant is going to be able to argue the fact that, well, you approved this, you got to approve something else. So I don't think we're going to be able to do that.
Okay, well, it's happened. Well, a lot of times we have the argument of compatibility. So obviously Heritage Farms, you do have some smaller units, but I'm looking at this, the lot analysis in our backup material. And there's a parcel in there that's 313 acres. And I'm sure it's not, it's one landowner, and I'm sure it's not totally developed. Along with, 25 to 87 parcels are 25 to 80 acres. And there are no units built on this property. What do those homeowners property owners, not homeowners, get to do with their property? Or is there the opportunity for them to develop something like this within Heritage Farms at?
So just for clarification, that 300-acre parcel is the South Florida National Cemetery?
Okay,
yes.
I did not know that.
Yes.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Wow. We won't need a lot of schools or roads for them. Thank you, Lord.
And then your question was how the other residential.
The 25 to 80 acre parcels. Is that fallow, or is that?
Yeah, so they're a combination of agricultural, nursery, residential, estate homes.
Okay, so this overlay that they are proposing for Heritage Farms, and Richard, I feel for you. I've been there. That's why I moved from Broward County up to here. Been on Boynton and Jog for 42 years, and I've seen the change, and it is very frustrating, and protecting you has become quite difficult. But the thing is, Well, I guess when the overlay comes regarding Heritage Farms, we're going to get more information. So right now, today, we should just focus on this parcel of property, the fact that it is not going to require this to be moving the rural tier, which was the biggest thing on my mind. I mean, let's have some kind of line in granite somewhere. So, and again, I appreciate Mr. Zuckerman working with the property owners the way he has. And like I say, I have spoken with the two. One is sort of like, well, it's the best we can get. And the other one is like, we will welcome this development. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I may, so the question really today is, does this application proceed with a text amendment, keeping it in the rural tier,
Yes.
or does it proceed through the tier change process?
Agreed. Understand.
On WebEx, do we have any questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Kara Cap. I just really wanted to thank those two members of the public who came. You know, we see a lot of members of the public come. They were so well prepared, helpful with their insight, and even to come and have your voice heard after, you know, a day after surgery. Their input was really helpful for me to hear, so wanted to thank them.
Anyone else on WebEx having any questions or comments?
No comments from me.
This time, no comments from me.
Okay, I have a question here with the location here on the wording, the site located contiguous to the urban suburban tier. How does that affect the property to the south, the agricultural reserve? Just want to clarify to make sure, because it doesn't say that this has to be within the rural tier.
Right, so the text amendment has language which confines it to the subject site, and also there would be map series amendments which would identify the specific geographical boundaries of the charting center overlay. So essentially this limits it just to the site, these text amendments.
Okay. The text amendment, but where it says location, the site must be located contiguous to the urban suburban tier.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning directly across and right away with frontage and access only onto State Road 7. Okay, so that would include the agricultural reserve below that.
No, because we would also have the boundaries in the map series that shows just the trotting center outlined as this overlay.
Mm-hmm. I understand it would be in the map series, but when it's written down like this and somebody sees it, there could be confusion, real confusion. Yeah.
Okay, well, we can work with applicant maybe to tweak that a little bit to make it a little bit more tight.
Well, if you state it that within the rural tier, then that.
Right.
We're
yeah.
all talking about not changing tiers and all. Well, you got to state the rural tier within the rural tier, because I don't see where it says the Trotting Center overlay. This is only for the rural tier. It doesn't say that anywhere here.
Yeah, so the objective 1.12 would be, if adopted by the board, would be embedded within the rural tier policies of the comprehensive plan. So it would be very clear that that it's related to the rural tier.
Okay, location. Why can't we just be a little redundant and only put it in the rural tier? I was just wondering, with 1.6 units per acre, how are we going to get the workforce housing on that property? I know this is initiation of this, and it's not the
right.
We haven't had that discussion yet. But are we going to be having some information on that? We've had every single project that comes through with this many homes. I mean, they've contributed to the workforce housing program, and I see they can't get any density bonus with it, but. Don't they have to contribute or not?
Well, so at this point, right, it's initiation. When we come back, should the board initiate, when we have our initiation staff reports are not as detailed and don't have all the analysis as, that you would see when an actual item comes forward. So we'll have, discussion and analysis on that. I do want to point out, though, that the mandatory workforce housing program is only applicable within the urban suburban tier.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, they changed that a bit.
Well, what we do, let me clarify that comment.
Yes,
so the workforce housing program is only mandatory in the urban suburban tier. However, what staff does is when there's a future land use amendment, we consistently recommend the 10% on site if it's for sale, 20% on site if it's townhome, 25% on site if it is rental, and that's for future land use amendments. When a project is not seeking a future land use amendment and there isn't that legislative process, then the mandatory workforce housing program is only within the urban suburban tier.
Mm-hmm. And but what about the essential housing?
So the essential housing, that was limited to certain Boynton Beach, Atlantic segments of those corridors just within the agricultural reserve tier. So that future land use designation is specific to that.
Right. So now that we're in the rural tier, what about that essential housing in the rural tier?
That is not something we have explored.
Equitable for all the tiers of the county.
Yeah, that is
something I think that really needs to be discussed and investigated and vetted out, because we're only talking a few miles away from this. They were suggesting, workforce housing and increased density west of 441. And this is just a few miles away. I don't know why everybody looks like they don't know why I'm going there, but so I think that that needs to be really discussed. I couldn't support this today like this, but maybe I'll go ahead and vote for the initiation. But these, if you assure me that this is going to be seriously, considered, and it's going to come before us.
Yeah, if initiated, like I said, we'll have more detailed analysis on all the various topics, including workforce housing, service providers, all those impacts. There'll be a much more detailed discussion at that point. Again, this is initiation of the text.
Yeah. Okay.
May I?
Go ahead.
Temporary chair of the day, Commissioner Vinegar, I completely understand and appreciate your comments.
Okay.
Just want to say that.
Well, can I then interject?
Go ahead.
The workforce housing / essential housing element, that was for areas that were supposed to be closer to economic centers, employment opportunities. I mean, Heritage Farms has a very unique character. An awful lot of nurseries, not awful, but a great deal of nurseries. There are people that have the most beautiful homes and manicured lawns and horse stables. And, it really is something that everybody would love to have. But when we're talking about workforce housing, we're talking at an income level where nobody would be able to afford this. I mean, we had a proposition, it's going to go on Lyons Road, where it's a line home starting at $800,000. I'm sure these homes are going to start even more than that because they're not zero lot line. But how do we cram workforce housing into that square, whatever they do, into the round hole? And sometimes it just doesn't work. Should they be able to contribute towards the construction? But sometimes placement of workforce housing in a development just doesn't fit. Thank you.
Okay, well, considering that, thinking about how we've heard comments in the past year or two, how workforce housing may not fit into the agricultural reserve, because some people just can't live in the agricultural reserve, just like they can't live at the ocean. But we still managed to put it there, essential housing, and I'm very proud of that and very happy that this essential housing element was included for along Atlantic Avenue and Boynton Beach Boulevard. And I think that possibly something can be worked out for this area. I'm very, very familiar with this area. I almost purchased in Heritage Farms in 1998. Very close to Ms. McCoffey's property there, and Richard Moyrod, who taught me about native plants in a local college. He's an excellent teacher. So I'm very familiar with that area, and there are jobs available around there. There is a possibility of, Hypoluxo Road came through, and just something to think about, and I'm looking forward to that coming back. I'll vote for this today. I know it's initiation. People say just initiation, but as Commissioner Ross said, we know how these things happen, and they come through, and it'll be worked out and worked on, and then I'm looking forward to seeing what happens at Transmittal. Thank you all for your work. It's been a long time that this has been worked on. I understand from speaking to Jeff Brophy and all, who's an excellent representative for the applicant. I understand you're working with the local people and the local residents and property owners, and they do want less density, but we have to work this thing throughout the entire county, as we discussed. Remember, with bringing the 25% and the 35% and how we should decide to possibly use that for every tier. Remember the 35%? That discussion happened a couple of weeks ago at the Board of County Commissioners. So something should be worked out here. And I'm interested to see what comes back. If there's no other discussion or questions.
Make a motion to approve the initiation, please.
Great. A motion to approve by Commissioner John Carr. A second? Seconded by Commissioner Dagmar Bras. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, can we please have a roll call vote on that?
John Carr.
Aye.
Barbara Roth.
Yes.
Lori Vinegar.
Yes.
Dagmar Bras.
Yes.
Angela Van.
Yes.
Marcia Hayden.
Yes.
Cara Cap.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all. That was a nice discussion. We have updates and comments. Any comments by commission members? Anybody? I see that Barbara Roth has her hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Planning Director. Last meeting, 2 meetings ago, one of my fellow commissioners, I believe it was Commissioner Van, in a discussion about the buyout in lieu option, requested that we get a better understanding of where that buyout money is and how it is being used. Subsequently, I've received a lot of questions and comments about that. And I personally, would appreciate an update on that as to how that money is used by the county and in what timely fashion is it expended. Because just as recently as this past week, people have sent me messages saying, well, if there's all that money sitting in a bank somewhere, why doesn't the county just build money? I build the housing. I know the answer to that. I take time to explain it to other people. But I think we need, we've had public discussion about essential housing. We've understood that and the strategic placement of those units. But now we're getting into an area that people are beginning to hear as more and more buyout projects come along. Thank you.
I actually had that on my list of things to talk about, and I have my my notes. So,
Great. Okay.
so if you want to do
we
do
will
commissioner now
do everything
under my comments, yes.
Any other commissioners have any comments or anything? Anybody from WebEx? Okay, there's apparently no comments. Planning, Zoning, and Building Executive Director.
No comments.
No comments. Okay. Assistant County Attorney.
No comments.
Thank you. Now the Planning Director. Go ahead.
No comments. Just kidding. Just kidding. The first thing I did want to note is, before I get into the in lieu fees, is we do expect very heavy agendas for October and November. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. It will not be as quick as today's meeting. So with respect to the question from 2 meetings ago about the in lieu fees and constructing, what that money is being used for, is it to construct units? So in lieu fees, when they're collected, are put into the Workforce Housing Trust Fund. the Board of County Commissioners in March of 2018 adopted a strategy for how to utilize those funds, and the funds are used to provide gap financing, which would be, down payment assistance, closing cost assistance. There is a maximum award of how much an individual can receive based on which AMI category. There's a higher percentage for people in the 60 to 80, the lowest category of the workforce housing program. And then it drops down at 27% is the maximum award range, and then drops down to 10% if you're in the highest AMI bracket, which is the 120 to 140. To date, there have been approximately $15.5 million that have been collected through the in lieu fee payment. But again, so I think the main point to address the question that meeting was about building units, and these funds aren't to construct new units, it's to provide that assistance to people trying to get into a workforce housing program unit.
Okay, anything else? Okay, any questions? Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I find this a little frustrating, to say the least, because I thought we were going to build units for people that are in this economic category for them to move in, but we're basically helping people with mortgage down payments or
Yes, so the, where do I have that detail? So the funds that are awarded as a deferred payment loan, it's secured by a recorded mortgage and note with a 0% interest and 15-year term.
okay, so it's a loan.
Mm-hmm.
So the money is really there. I mean, it eventually will get back into the pot to be used. So this is something that's just gonna, and these are for homeowners, not developers.
This is for the homeowners. So they are, the way the fees are returned to the pot. So let's say someone can qualify for a workforce housing program unit. They move into the unit. If they then sell within prior to 15 years, then that down payment assistance is required to be repaid. Otherwise, it's not.
Okay, but at the same time, they're getting a reduced rate because it is a workforce housing unit. So not only are we trying to give them a house they can afford, we're helping them with the mortgage. So you got a bank mortgage, you got, what is that called, a PMI, where you have to come up with a certain amount? You know, you have to have a small mortgage that you're going to pay the big mortgage or whatever.
Oh, right, because you need a certain percentage down, I think, and then if you can't reach that, there's that secondary mortgage, right?
So at the end of the day, how many units have been built from any of the funds that were contributed by developers?
So the in lieu fee payments, those are not used to develop. The total number of units that have been developed either on-site, because some have gone with the on-site option, others have used the exchange program or off-site. The last count I have, I believe it's in the ballpark of 2,500 units.
Oh, okay, well that's substantial. Okay, and then the 15.5 million that was collected, that is only being used to help people in that economic category to make a mortgage payment.
Right, so the figures that we have is 3.2 million has been used for the gap financing. Another 1.4 million is set aside for purchasers that are currently under contract for their unit. And then there's another 3.1 million committed for purchasers that are certified as eligible, but not quite yet under contract.
Well, I don't have to keep track of all that stuff. Okay. Well,
And if I could just add one other thing, we are going to be scheduling a workshop, not just on this topic, but if you'll remember at the Board of County Commissioners meeting last week, the discussion on appropriateness of density, the workforce housing program, TDRs, how these all tie together, and a way to kind of don't know if you can totally simplify something, but these types of topics that we're talking about now, that'll all be, I think, a component of that larger workshop, which we're targeting for.
I'm looking forward to hearing it, but I just want to say, there's a development that's coming up in the Tacoma area, and it is townhomes, and it would look like the perfect opportunity to construct workforce housing, and the developer has opted to buy out of the program. Cobra's really getting much more focused on making sure these units are happening, that they're included in the projects that are along corridors that are heavily populated or have economic opportunities or whatnot. But the commissioners have allotted a buyout option. So it makes it very difficult for us to put our feet in the sand and say, no, you have to build the units on site. Other than the fact that they have to have, they need to look like the units that are in the same development. The finishes, my understanding, the finishes aren't supposed to be up as the higher level, but why is it so difficult? Why are the developers always doing the buyout option? And I'll stop talking.
I will say, and maybe you could jump in if I'm misspeaking, but I feel like we have seen more willingness projects lately to either build a component on site or to utilize an exchange option or an off-site, but not as much of a dependence on using the in lieu option. And I think part of that is it's been clear from some of the board discussions that at the Board of County Commissioners that they want to see units being built. So, my perception from the projects that I've seen in my time is that we're seeing an uptick in options other than the in lieu fee option.
Thank you.
May I? Yeah.
Go ahead, Commissioner Roth.
Yes, I'm sorry, Chair, but this is 2 points. It's wonderful to assist people with that mortgage money. Those are for units that are for sale. We know that there are many workforce housing, essential housing units that are rental units. And those units, when they are built, come at the expense of increased density, sometimes hyperdensity. So I would urge my fellow commissioners to recognize that is good, that people who can buy units that are being sold as workforce housing can get assistance with that. But people who are renting are relying on the sliding scale, dependent upon their household income, number of people in the income. But what happens with those projects, is that much higher density comes with it. There are density bonuses, and I will continue to point that out. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Any other comments by the
That was all I had for
director? Thank you. Any other questions or comments by the board members, or on WebEx or here? Okay, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Yes, great. Dagmar and anybody second that motion? Barbara Roth and all those in favor? We're adjourned.
Aye.
Yes. Somebody said something up there. Oh, okay.
And thank you for serving as chair today.
Okay, thank you.